Coming up on Gunters Universe, episode 27, I talk with Mike Alger, VR designer focusing on interface methods and interaction. His video titled VR Interface Design Pre-Visualization Methods was recently posted and caught attention from the Oculus subreddit. In the video, Mike shares a variety of ideas on how to do VR interface design well. We'll talk to him tonight about his research and his insights. Stay tuned.
VR Chat, the next frontier. These are the experiences from Gunters' universe. His continuing mission, to seek out and connect with VR devs and passionate enthusiasts, to discuss theories, beliefs, and rhetoric of all kind, and to boldly go where no show has ever gone before.
Welcome everyone to Gunters Universe. This is the one and only live talk show broadcasting from the metaverse. Join us in VR Chat every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific to watch the show live in VR. It is a unique social experience that you will never forget. You can also watch the live stream at hitbox.tv/Gunter444. With me tonight is my beautiful, darling, cute co-host, Mr. Whiskers. Welcome back. How are you? I don't think he likes being called cute and darling. It's good to see you. And also with us, we have our guest for the night, Mike Alger. He is a designer of all sorts, including motion graphics and now VR. He's been researching how interfaces could work in VR and has documented his findings in a well-produced, concise video titled VR Interface Design Pre-Visualization Methods, which you can find on his YouTube channel, Mike Alger. How's it going, Mike?
Good. A little disappointed that I didn't get the cute and darling introduction, but yeah, things are good.
I didn't want to do screaming and clawing at me, so I dare not do that to somebody else.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming out, and let's talk about all the stuff you've been working on. First, just a little bit of background information on you, your school stuff you've been doing, and your professional career.
Okay. So I guess probably the best way to say it is that VR kind of has had this sort of revival thing in the last few years after the Kickstarter and stuff from Oculus, and then all these other things coming out, Vive, PlayStation, everything. So a lot of people who are doing it now are people who were doing something else 3 years ago, I guess, and the something else that I was doing was video production and motion graphics and motion design. So that is to say, like, I started out with like a kind of a film degree, I guess, and then kind of got into web design, and then the marriage of those two of video and graphic design is motion design, which is like motion graphics and stuff. But then as this VR stuff started to pick up, I was like, ooh, I really want to get into that, and I want to work in that, but my skill set is in these workflows. So where could I try to contribute to the success of this medium? And I figured probably interfaces was going to be that sort of thing. And so it was also at a time when I thought I should maybe go live somewhere else, and so I decided to go do a master's in London and focus on VR as a design medium, and how we can take stuff from what we've learned in other mediums of design and apply them to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're a designer, and now you're basically taking your skills that you've learned in video and web and motion design, and now applying them to VR. It sounds. I've done some similar work, so I'm very interested in these sorts of things as well. So it's been a pleasure to get to know you and to see your video, and I'm learning a lot from you. So I'm really excited about this talk. I'm kind of going to
Cool.
just step through a little bit of the videos. There's two videos that I've seen of yours. The first one is the VR Interface Design Manifesto, and that seems to go into using VR and what maybe an operating system would look like on VR, stuff like multitasking, productivity. Can you talk a little bit about that to start? And I'm going to play your video in the background and try to skip around in it. Yeah, hopefully that'll work.
Yeah, sure. So really, like, to pull the veil off of it as like a useful thing, it was actually just that the university that I was going to, I wanted to do this VR stuff, but I needed to kind of present the concept to them as like, this is what I'm going to be researching, because I wanted them to get a DK2 and leap motion that I would be able to use. And so it was a kind of a presentation to say, hey, this could be really cool stuff. It's a whole new direction for these things. I'd like to go into this. And so the assignment for the university was to create a manifesto. And, because video is what I know, I thought that I may as well do it in video form. And so, yeah, I created that to kind of announce those intentions for myself, but also to try to convince them to get a DK2 for me to use. And what do you know, I'm wearing it right now, so great.
Awesome. That's some good motivation there, and obviously it's worked out really well. Your video's well produced. You're from the film video production background, so it's great. You basically did the whole thing yourself. You created the motion graphics, you set up the camera, and stepped through your slides while you put your camera in some really cool looking locations, and it's just well produced. I really dig it.
Thanks. That's actually the balcony of where I was living. So it was cold though. Like, that's why I'm kind of like huddled up a little bit. I don't know. I came across as I don't know. It's weird to say, but it came across as like a little douchey in the beginning, the way that I was talking. But it was I was too cold to do it again. So
it didn't come off that way to me. It comes off pro.
Okay. Maybe it was just some of the way that people, Reddit comments, haters, whatever. I guess I don't know.
I've had some of those, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Screw them. So let's talk a little bit more about the manifesto. A bit about, like, here we're looking at talking about how to draw, how motion graphics and web design, they kind of draw on these natural things that are kind of embedded in all humans. Like here we see motion, and how the human eye automatically is drawn to motion, or things like contrast when we're trying to pick out differences in our environment. These things are hardwired into our brain. Can you talk a little bit about that sort of aspect of the manifesto?
Sure. So the concept comes from again, these are the things that we've already learned in all these other mediums, like theater and architecture and graphic design and video production, all these things. So you have kind of these basic things of clarity and symbols and ways to draw attention with motion and contrast and color and that sort of stuff. And the basis of those really comes down to the way that our senses evolved and the way that we evolved to react to the stimulus that we receive from the environment around us. So where other branches of creatures may have evolved echolocation, or the ability to sense the electromagnetic field to be able to fly in a certain direction at a certain time of year, and the instinct to do that, we have the same thing where, if a woman is pregnant, she's more likely to have nesting tendencies, and that's just like us as animals, humans, whatever. And so the concept of good web design or good environment design or any kind of design, you might say, is just a method of trying to get somebody to do something or understand something without having to be told, being naturally guided through a process, which is why you hear the term intuitive so often, because that's the that's the buzzword for it, but it is, by definition, the thing that makes sense. It's knowing something without having to be told. And so the idea for VR design, in my opinion, would be to figure out what is intuitive in this volumetric but digital space.
Right. I think that's pretty smart, and it's definitely that intuitive nature is what we need and what we're seeing more, I think, in our in digital design these days versus in the 90s, where you'd just be reading a bunch of text boxes and tooltips and trying to be told what to do. Nobody can understand it. But now, in our current form of internet and media, even grandma can now grasp it because it's been distilled down to the simplest sort of form. So, what is VR going to look like? We don't want to have a bunch of tooltips and pop-ups popping up in the way and how to use your controllers or how to do this and that. We want this all to be very natural. And I'm really interested in your thoughts on this and how you were talking about like web designers, which is what I do, needing to transfer their skills into something broader than just the window of the screen and how things are confined there, to branch out into now we're talking about 360 degrees into where we're now putting people into an environment. So now they're becoming environmental design. So I'm starting to think like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if you could talk a bit more about the challenges of things like that for the web designers and how we get people to what we're going to point them to, how we're going to get them to interact, you mentioned stuff like social cues and making them compelled to look at things.
Yeah, man, I was really glad to be at the university that I was at, actually, specifically because in the program that we were doing, there was also architects and like 3D printing professionals and fashion designers, but we were all in the same, blob. All the postgraduates were together having the same assignments, for better or worse, because it kind of seemed like, well, what's the point of even having different titles on our things if we're all doing the same thing? But from my perspective, it was actually really helpful because I could look at what the environment designers / architects were doing. And Josh, I think it's Josh Carpenter at Mozilla, gave a really great presentation where he said the way that web VR is going, people who are web designers previously learned from the print medium, like graphic design and magazines and newspapers, and what we basically took the things that we knew from those and applied them to this interactive medium, adding things like hyperlinks and buttons and videos and the interactability with that. So there was a lot of that that discipline that was learned in that Web 2.0 revolution that happened when everybody decided, actually, this needs to be better designed, and then web developers and designers really started to work together or become one person even, but thinking about the design process as it was important to the user experience. And now, the way that he said it in that talk, it was, I totally agree that the next disciplines that you will need to be learning from are interior design, architecture, and environment design, looking at the way that cities are planned, the way that museum exhibits are laid out, the way that an airport is, designed to draw people to go to the right directions, or the way that maybe public transport is designed to get you to understand where to look, where to go, and absorb information quickly. Of course, I say these things, some of them are more examples that would require some sort of locomotion or going through an environment, but virtual reality is a little different in the sense that you can be bringing the content to you or teleporting between places, and so obviously there's going to be a lot of differences, but that's, there's still a lot that we can learn from those as far as spatial relationships between things, the way that lighting in environments or colors makes us feel, or how they inspire certain social interactions or those sorts of things. I actually have been, I've been coming into VR chat for the weekly meetups as often as I can, and I've been kind of purposely observing the way that people will interact in these spaces, and I think that I've kind of boiled it down to the priorities that people have, which is first to explore the environment, second to interact with anything that is interactable in the environment, and then third to get to the highest point possible.
That's a good observation. That's that's very interesting. Yeah, I was wondering, like, I didn't know you were actually up to all this work, and we've been, hanging out, talking, and doing things in here. So yeah, you've been paying attention to these things, observing behaviors, trying to figure out what people do, and yeah, climbing to the top. King of the hill, I guess, is the thing we like to do here a lot.
Always. It's so interesting. And then I started thinking, is this a part of that human nature thing? Like, why do people do these? And it seems to always be in that order. And then I started to look at my own behavior and think about and look at what people are doing in real life, and I realized that it's the same. We went to there's this building that people refer to as the walkie-talkie in London, and you can go to the top of it for free if you sign up for this thing. It's really gorgeous in there, a really nicely designed environment that would actually be really great in VR also. But watching what everybody does, they go in, they explore the place first and look around at everything, and then they immediately go to what things are interactable, which in this case there's some binoculars that you can look through over the city and that sort of stuff. Right. And then they go to the balcony sort of thing and get some panorama, so they do the interactive stuff, and then they get to the highest point they can, which is like up these stairs. And it's weird. I mean, if you go camping, you might notice that you've done the same thing. You show up, you explore the place, you like pick up sticks and start touching things, and like you get kind of you start setting up your place, and then you're like, let's climb to the top of that mountain. It's I don't know if this is really founded in anything. This is just like an opinion that I've formed really recently, but it seems to be what people are doing in VR chat, and so I was thinking, okay, this is how this can help maybe start thinking about how to design environments to be conducive to that, to be like pleasurable or delightful experiences for users to do those sorts of things, I guess.
I think those are great observations. Yeah, especially comparing to the camping experience, or going up into the top of that building and checking out the binoculars. I mean, that totally resonates with myself. I have to think about these things here as I'm doing events here and stuff, and I sort of am not doing that here. I kind of bring everybody here and tell everybody to sit down. I'm sure everybody right now is pretty antsy, and I'd love to have more interactivity, and these things will come into VR chat, or I'll be able to get the time or figure them out, and I'm always looking for suggestions. But yeah, people had something to do, like a text chat, I guess could be one thing if we could see that over the table here and see people talking via text, because not everybody can talk at the same time in this sort of forum. Or maybe I should start the show 30 minutes before and put the show at the top of a mountain, and then everybody that gets up there first gets the best seat.
I was actually, I was thinking about the same thing. I was thinking that a game show sort of environment might be a cool one where you have to get to the top of a hill through some sort of like answering quiz questions along the way, and the first person at the top gets something, or I don't know. But this is not necessarily related to Gunters universe. This is just like an idea for an environment.
Well, no, absolutely. I'm all about all kinds of events. I want to bring fun here as much as possible, and so yeah, we sort of thought about these things. Trivia has been an idea. We're doing karaoke on Fridays now, and so that's a thing to do, very social, and just we're being very interactive with each other. So yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to more and more of that sort of thing, and we're seeing people around us that build here in VR Chat exploring more of the interactivity. It's kind of been these stages from avatars and rooms to animations and interactivity now, so it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
All right, so we're at the part of the video where we're talking about interaction, and so you've got a leap motion here, and we're looking at a video of somebody with a leap motion, and they're kind of prototype for some input methods. Can you talk a bit about the various kind of menus and interaction systems that you've thought about so far?
Yeah. That's well, there's so many. It's kind of, I mean, the thing that is on the video screen right now is Leap Motion's planetarium demo. So that's something that they made. And yeah, I mean, you've got kind of some typical things that we tend to want to control, which is you have like a toggle, you have a range selector, you have like scrolling capabilities, and you can think about how these exist in other forms. So when I say range selector, in real life that would be like a volume knob on like an amplifier or something like that. Like you want to like grab it and turn it, and it has like a low and a high value that it stops at, basically. But then on a 2D digital workspace, be it iPad or desktop or something like that, that sort of radial, like turning a knob, is not really a very great experience with a mouse, and so we've kind of ended up on that, a line with a notch or a dot or something that you drag between the lowest and highest. And so, like, going into the VR side of things, the thing that I suggested in the video was to have, like, you intersect your hand with maybe a cylinder or something like that, and then slide it up and down, and it seems to be kind of a nice experience to have, I guess. And it kind of visually is similar to something being full or empty, like a container. So you have like, a liquid filling up a container, might be what it looks like, but you are controlling it, dragging it with your hand. So that's kind of one of the concepts. But yeah, there's like raycast cursors, or there's the crosshair thing that I mentioned in the other video. It's kind of more like aiming a gun, and it's a little easier for precision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I'm gonna bring those up and show those. So we should probably say more of that. And I think it's a good time to go into the other video and start kind of move through that, talking about. I think it starts off with movie kind of HMDs or movie interfaces like Iron Man or Tron or Ender's Game, and how people were moving screens, these opaque virtual screens around with lots of information and interacting with that. If you can kind of start there, and then I have some other things that I'll bring us to talk about.
Sure. Well, the reason I started the video with that is it's kind of a hook, in the sense that everybody loves to see these interfaces and stuff. It's always so cool, and you want to have something like that. And I'm definitely not the first person to think, but that would be really confusing. I would actually want something to be a little more simple or whatever. But that's totally fine. It's purposely stylistically designed to match whatever the visual style of the film is, but also to communicate some sort of meaning about like a character or an environment or a plot point or something like that. And typically that is that it's a powerful technology, or that it's mysterious, or that it's going to like be a big deal if it gets shut down or if it gets used or something like that. So that's totally fine that they're being designed like that, but when people get excited about it, they might start to think of like, what would I use it for? Well, how would it be useful to me? And that's something that I've kind of thought about over time. I don't think that I even necessarily have the best answers of anybody, but I know that a lot of people are thinking about it. It just seems like maybe not a lot of people are talking about it, and so I think that maybe making some videos and kind of getting people talking about that space sort of inspires. I would think that other people would probably have started thinking about some of the ways that they can solve these things, because that's where you get new interaction types that you know, come from other people. Like the pull down to refresh on the smartphone is kind of a good example of a recent one that wasn't necessarily, like, it didn't come from the designers of the multi-touch interface, but it's still a really good interaction type, I guess. So
right, you're trying to explore like what user patterns in this space, you know, could be possible, and talking about like a not clutter. Like, we shouldn't default to think Iron Man should be the way that all of these interfaces are going to work. What is really practically going to work? Let's start that conversation, and that's what this video and your information was doing for me. Was really starting to get my head thinking there, connecting it to the web design stuff that I've thought about in the past. And you know, here we're getting to the point where you're going to talk about you know, what's useful. What do people really want to do? What would they want to do in these spaces? You know, why? You know, you talk about something like more screen space and things like that. So let's go to that kind of side of things. What would people? Why would they want to have these HMDs or these VR interfaces in our HMDs?
okay, yeah. So that was the first thing in thinking. Okay, if I want to try to design anything, I should think about what are people going to want to do. And so I looked at what are the top websites on like Alexa, went through those, the most used applications on desktops and the most used apps on mobile, and then tried to narrow those down by what their primary tasks are. So like I'm trying to think of any examples of them specifically, but without, like, you know, obviously having my actual papers visible. I've got them all on my notes and stuff. But yeah, that was basically, I just put them into what tasks people currently even want to use their computers for, their 2D computers, and then think about what those could be, how that could translate into the 3D space. So I was kind of surprised to find that it seems that we only have about like 35 things that we do. And it seems really weird, but I was thinking, well, if we could just design these 35 things, like an application for that, then you're home free, right? But it turns out to be significantly more difficult. It's easier said than done, you know, like any single one of these, turning it from 2D into 3D is actually an enormous paradigm shift. So there's the example that I kind of wanted to talk about, actually, was the first one I started out with was, okay, one of the things people use both computers and phones for is organizing their schedule. You usually have a calendar, whether you're somebody that wants to use the calendar on your phone or computer or Google or whatever, or, you know, setting events, reminders, alerts, that sort of stuff, and just organizing your schedule is a really simple one. And so I was thinking, okay, can this be redesigned for a 3D space? Because we typically have the 2D calendar, which then you can switch the view to maybe a timeline, which is kind of, you know, it's either this 2D grid or this one-dimensional timeline. But is there a way that that can be more communicative in volume or with depth? And so I was thinking, you get like nativity calendars, it's Stonehenge like a 3D calendar in some way. Like, does it ever exist? Have we ever done something like that? Is there like Mayan situations for sundials or anything like that where there's like it's being spatially represented? And I was kind of, you know, really confused about this, or not confused, but it just really, there didn't seem to be any sort of answer to this sort of thing for this entire time, actually, until I was writing to somebody about it 2 days ago, and I thought, wait a minute, okay, so the reason that, like, and I kept trying to do these, like, even just designing the 2D calendar in different ways, but the reason that it's difficult is because if you do it in a line, it's not helpful, because you can't see Sunday repeating every time, or the month repeating every time. So that's why the grid is useful, because the weekends, the weekdays are easy to pick out, and the months are easy to see the beginning and ends of them. And then you can easily stick your events into those and see where they fit within time, which is infinite in either direction. But it's really the cyclical nature of it that is kind of important to the understanding of it. And so I was thinking, okay, if you're going in cycles and going infinitely in either direction, what you end up with, I guess, is a helix, which is actually one of the 3D forms that is not actually communicable that in a nice way on a 2D thing. So if you have a poster with a helix on it, it's not that communicative. You may as well just have a single line. But some guys who are just around here called Masters of Pi just barely did the Big Data Challenge and won that with this kind of concept. And talking to Matt from them, he said that helix is really the helix is really nature's way of compressing data, which is in string form, into a smaller space anyway, in the form of DNA, with a double helix, of course. But we can use that in VR as a way of compressing data in a way that's easy for us to understand, but see the patterns over and over. And so I was thinking, okay, this can probably be applied to the calendar, in the sense that you have, you know, the year every January. This is so difficult to describe without using hands, so I wish I had hydras right now. Yeah. But, you know, if you can think the helix of being, you have January at the top, it goes around through July at the bottom, and then January's at the top again, and you're going forward in this spiral, which is continuing infinitely in either direction of time, of course. But within that spiral that spiral is made up of the smaller spiral of the months. You have the beginning of the month, which comes to the top again of itself every beginning of every month. So you have a spiral within a spiral, which then is made up of weeks, which is made up of days. And so you kind of would be able to zoom into and out of this cyclical situation. So I need to do some mock-up visualizations of this and stuff, but I thought, oh, this would be another great video, right? Like, like, yeah, it's just, I don't know, I've totally gone off on a tangent and rambling and stuff, but I'm really excited about it, I guess. It's just like, it's just a good example of trying to think of, I guess, whether, and I don't know whether this will be more communicative, of course, than a 2D calendar. It might be just a cool idea that ends up not being faster or easier to use. But it's just a good example, I felt, of the way that we can use 3D forms and shapes to communicate concepts in new ways that we don't need to be stuck to just having 2D planes floating around you necessarily.
Yeah, I love that, and it's a tangent that you're going on to see. You got to explore it, see if it works. But that breaking out of the traditional model, I mean, it's just like crazy to rack your brain around it. But someday, you know, this is going to be one of these ideas is going to work, and it's just going to be how things are done, just like the calendar in its current form is now.
Yeah.
What about like the environmental thing? I could imagine like your environment, you know, of course seasonally could change where the sun, if you know the sun's if it's noon. It could be showing, you know, the sun at the, you know, at noon as where it would be positioned and things like that. Or I guess if you've had certain events in the past before and they're repeating, maybe certain other media that's attached to that, or objects or things that could be pulled into your environment with those kinds of days. So I guess that's where the environmental design part of it's coming into play.
Yeah, I was thinking about dynamic environments and whether like you could be affecting a user's mood based on the weather or the you know, obviously people's moods and the way that people feel is affected by the weather and their environments and stuff, and like there are certain things that people will do as a result of that. That's what I was thinking. Oh yeah, if somebody's like too excited, you could calm them down with the rain or something like that. But then the obvious question is, when would anybody not want a sunny day? Like when would anybody want it to be? You know, if they have control of the environment, they're probably going to want it to be nicer all the time.
An ideal, always the ideal, whatever their ideal is.
Yeah.
I could see like in like therapy or psychology, like mood disorders. I think sometimes some people are very up and they do need to kind of go into a calming. I mean, I guess the beach could be calming, but I don't know, not so bright. Things be dimmed a little bit because, you know, some people are so much information's being beamed at them. But that's kind of a different area, the whole psychology and stuff. That it's very interesting, but you know, I know nothing really about any of this.
I think Deep Rifter's the guy for that, actually.
Indeed, I love talking to him about these sorts of things. He's always got interesting and novel ideas in that department. Okay, so let's talk more about GUI and those different interfaces. We were starting to talk about crosshairs, and in your video here it kind of shows them. So let's skip to that point.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll just reiterate what it says right here on that part of the video. That the graphical user interface that we're familiar with of what is called the WIMP interface of Windows icon menu pointer was actually invented after Ivan Sutherland had made the sort of Damocles head-mounted display. And Ivan Sutherland is a really cool dude, man. Like you could also say that he also invented the first GUI with his Sketchpad application. But when we think of GUI currently, with the Windows and all of that sort of stuff, we tend to think of those rectangular forms and all that sort of stuff. But his thing was a precursor to that, and so we've become familiar with all of these 2D forms because of the commercialization of PCs and the fact that we didn't really have the power to have to overcome simulator sickness until just very recently because of smartphone revolution, all that sort of stuff. But that doesn't mean that people haven't been working in VR this whole time. Like, there's been plenty of work done. And plenty of papers written and studies that we can, stand on the shoulders of giants in some ways and already use the things that have been created. So, yeah, you've got like interaction methods that exist already, like those that are on the screen currently, where you have cursors, rotating objects. There's a couple of locomotion methods that have been tried. I'm talking about here methods for reducing some of the, like, if you try to point a laser pointer at something in the distance, it's difficult. Aiming a gun and shooting in a target range is difficult, and people practice it for a reason. It's not that easy. So you can kind of snap to things. You can intersect things with this sort of lens thing. This is from SpaceX. The way that this video is actually really great if you look it up. It's called The Future of Design by SpaceX, and they design all of their stuff in 3D because they want to avoid that abstraction that happens from 2D to 3D. Then there's this world in miniature concept, which is applied in several different ways, actually. So this one is one of the this was kind of a paper that introduced the topic with like some Disney Imagineering sort of applications and that sort of stuff. But people have been using it more recently where, for example, at the Vive Game Jam here in London recently, somebody made a thing where you're supposed to guide planes into where they're supposed to land, and you can see them in the environment around you, but you have a miniature world where you're actually guiding them in. And there's a lot of different ways to implement this world in miniature. There's also the idea, gosh, I can't remember his name, but he was also there, where he had it so that if you get really low to the ground, the scale of the world is full size, and if you stand up, the world is in miniature. And so that was kind of another interesting interaction method, I suppose, of being able to navigate going in between things. One that I'll mention that I didn't mention in this video, that I found that people actually find really compelling and really nice experience, is having small rooms that they can stick their head inside of. So, like, you can't really see the positional tracking, but while I'm sitting in this virtual chair, but the leaning forward and sticking your head inside of something and seeing what's going on inside of that is actually a really nice experience for people. So that's something that we might want to try making some things for, like an apartment building.
That at Connect last year, there's this little paper city.
Yes.
Just on a very small, like, paper city, Lego city that was down, right in front of me, and I could go into a house or the backyard or a street and just feel like I'm right there at some sort of I could position that camera basically anywhere in that city and take a look, and it was really cool. I only got like 30 seconds of it, so that's all I've seen of that. In VR chat, we have a Mario Kart world, and there is a little miniature of that world that you're going to go race in right outside the portal that takes you there. And it's cool to be able to look around, get an idea. I mean, it's kind of like that mini map that you would see in like a racing, like Mario Kart, but now it's exploded in the actual 3D replica miniature of that. And you can, the further you get down into it, the closer you are to it also. Changing your perspective like that, there's been a few things that I've played that sort of have that perspective change. Like when you get down closer to the ground, it gets bigger, and that stuff's pretty powerful. We've never seen anything or experienced anything like that before VR.
Yeah, what I mean to say is that it's like literally that you can't see what's in there until you stick your head in. Like, did you try sticking your head through the house or anything in the paper town?
I can't remember. It was over a year ago. I remember more of the backyard and street. So
yeah,
I have stuck my head through things in VR chat, but not like into a miniature, world like that.
Yeah. Usually when we're sticking our head through things, we're trying to break something. We want to see what's behind it.
I think Q Paradox had there was like a 360 sphere, and we would stick our head into there and look at some crude 360 videos that sort of a prototype situation happening in here. So I can think of that.
Yeah. anyways, that's just another one among all these other things that's kind of, you know, obviously doesn't really exist necessarily in a 2D form, but that we can start doing in these 3D things. There's teleportation and alt space. That's actually that big data challenge thing. This is a radial menu concept, and people, you know, that's the sort of visual effects stuff that people are like, oh yeah, you get pumped about. Like, but I did really like the idea of sticking these radial menus in a way that they are stacked so that you can navigate items radially, but also go through depth of them. And like later in the demonstration part, I would kind of use that as the sort of file edit view, help like typical menu actions, but stick them on concurrent, what would you call them, not toruses necessarily, but circles, I guess, just around the hands, and that you would select the next one by going forward through them. So, yeah.
Yes, so Mr. Whiskers here, he's got a way of interacting with his environment. It's more like the crosshairs scenario where you aim something and point. He uses his rocket launcher.
Yes.
Which is a great way to interact. It's become quite legendary. So I don't know if Mr. Whiskers, if you have your rocket launcher on you and you might want to demonstrate that, we wouldn't be opposed to it. It's,
whoa, hey, whoa, hey, man.
It's pretty, you know, it compels everyone else to do something, which is usually run away. So I guess that's interaction. Very cool. So let's see. Well, those radio menus, you know, they're very cool. It's like push a button, now I can, you know, select in a circle there different items in a menu that presents itself. But your hand was up in the air, you know, and you mentioned how we're lazy, and I'm certainly very lazy. We like to sit, and how we have our hands out in front of us, our reach, and you know what like is recommended by, you know, therapeutic way to sit in front of your computer and the degree that you look at it. So I assume maybe that holding your hand in the air, selecting in a dial like that might not be quite as useful, and you go into these different content zones. I found that to be some of the coolest part of the video that really struck me. So let's talk about that a little bit.
First, real quick, I'll talk about those, the wrist thing. So for the video, I hold up my arms and stuff to kind of make the point, but I do think that, the idea ultimately would be that somebody would just be sort of twitching the wrists a little bit, but not enough to...
Okay.
We want to avoid, you know, with these zones and with ergonomics and all that sort of stuff, we want to avoid repetition-based injuries, which is, you know, if people are doing some sort of job and they're doing the same motion over and over, they can get slow, small injuries over time, and this is where we've seen carpal tunnel show up in, you know, everybody was using mice and keyboards and that sort of stuff through the 80s and 90s, and then we started to realize, you know, that it was actually damaging to our bodies in this really tedious and annoying way. And so we have here the opportunity to eradicate carpal tunnel with using new interaction methods, but also planning them out in ways that people aren't going to be having to do things over and over that's going to cause those sorts of things. So the idea would be to have maybe small wrist movements and small arm movements that would be better for that kind of thing. And this actually comes into text input. Locomotion has been this huge question mark for design for VR for a really long time, and I think we've kind of started to come up with some good methods for how to move people around without making them sick, or do teleportation, or just not move at all and bring this stuff to them. But text input remains the next big question mark for me. And so actually they're not in the video, but if you look at the paper that's linked on the video, I do kind of suggest a couple of ways to use those radial menus to do text input, but the whole thing would be that it has to beat a keyboard. You have to be able to type faster than 60 words per minute with as good of accuracy, and it has to be learnable. Obviously you have to kind of learn how to keyboard, and this has to be learnable in a sense too, but we've all learned to use our thumbs to keyboard text over the last few years, and so we would kind of want to design something like that similarly. So I'm thinking that, yeah, if you have like maybe 6 options on the left hand and 6 options on the right hand, that gives you 36 different things that you could then modify pretty quickly with the depth difference. With if you stick your left hand forward, then it switches to numbers, forward more goes to symbols or something like that. So I'm thinking if you could like learn to twitch your wrists and in the right combinations fast enough, then maybe we could get up to that same benchmark, or maybe it's another interaction form like a combination of a radial menu and like the swipe texting method from phones, or something like that. So yeah, there's got to
like
be
our mobile phones keyboards is kind of it's not as good as keyboard, but it's pretty close, you know, and it's working for us. I think we've learned it. And yeah, pressing and holding gives you the other symbols and numbers. So that reminds me of something like you just said with the depth, using depth to maybe do that. Or Apple's now experimenting with the pushing in harder on the screen. So
oh yeah,
that's sort of a little bit of depth there to that. So yeah, it's very interesting.
yeah, for sure. So anyways, going on to the ergonomic zones concept, yeah, that's sort of an extension of that same idea, which is basically you know, we don't want people to be getting neck strain or be getting you don't want it to be a workout necessarily to be using VR for a work environment. So the zones that I present in this video are sort of just some measurements based on if you were sitting in a stationary chair, not a rotating one. So if you're in a rotating chair, this content zone that I present actually becomes a ring all the way around. This is assuming that you've figured out some sort of cable management system of hanging it from the ceiling or something like that, where you're not going to get tangled up or just bothered by it in general. But I figured that for these zones I may as well just present the most safe situation, which would be the DK2, which has maybe the smaller field of view, and then with a stationary chair and that sort of thing. And then what you come up with is sort of this content zone, this peripheral zone, and then a curiosity zone behind where you have to turn your shoulders to see. And what's tricky though is these depth zones, where I've got I put it at 0.5 meters near the user. Really it's as you can see there, it's actually sort of a gradient of where it's most comfortable. So
I see. Yeah.
yeah, so 0.5 is not like a hard line or anything. I put it like as because we like to have measurements, but realistically it's a gradient of discomfort that becomes more and more uncomfortable as you get closer to the face. But at a distance of 1 meter, things tend to be fine. And then the lenses of the DK2 are focused at 1.3 meters, as you see on the video there now. And so you're fine at that distance. 0.75 is like, you know, kind of okay, but 0.5 is like, okay, maybe that's close enough. And for example, that's the distance of the Moz VR interface. He'll do a cylinder wrapped around the user with a radius of 0.5 meters. So it's not necessarily a hard line, and then on the other end of that, you have the 20-meter distance, and that one I got by, it's partly from Alex Chu's presentation from Samsung, where he measured it as being the distance at which you just don't really see any more difference between objects because of the, basically pixels at that point. And so I did some mathematical calculations based on the number of pixels that you have per field of view, and you kind of get from that an average degree per pixel, and then you can just use trigonometry to say, well, if you have the same thing pixel per pixel on each eye, then that is infinitely far away to your eyes because they are parallel in facing forward. But if you move that by 1 pixel, that is that the right eye moves 1 pixel to the left and the left eye moves 1 pixel to the right, that appears to be 20 meters away. And this is true for, this depends on your interpupillary distance and a little bit based on the field of view of the device, as you can see in this, that equation that pops up there. Field of view, resolution, interpupillary distance, you can calculate what that distance is when you move that 1 pixel in, and it's about 20 meters for every device. The Vive, Gear VR, the DK2, CV1, they all end up at about 20 meters, and that's not to say that right now, sitting here, I can't perceive something that is more than 20 meters away. You do still perceive it, partly based on the positional tracking and partly based on the aliasing that happens on a sub-pixel level and the interpolation between colors. However, when I'm talking about interface design, I'm talking about somebody being able to recognize and understand something immediately, without having to lean to understand, or without having to focus for a second. You want them to be able to see it in their peripheral, or understand or read the text, or see the hierarchical relationship that is associated with the depth separation between things. And if that depth separation happens between 60 and 80 meters away, it's not going to be easily understood. It will be if it has a full pixel of difference between them, and that only happens within that range of 20 meters. So I think it maybe didn't explain that clearly enough in the video, because some people didn't really like the 20 meter distance, because yes, you can perceive depth past 20 meters, but it's just to say that if I'm designing interfaces, all of those elements, in order to have any sort of hierarchical importance, should be closer than 20 meters, but in order to not be causing eye strain for permanent elements, should be farther away than a half meter.
Right, you want to account for the minimal amount of usage or effort that needs to be applied for these motion gestures, and also for the readability, almost the observability. I don't know, like, you don't want to have to be leaning everywhere and trying to use your positional tracking to it's not squinting in this case, but it's just get closer to get a closer look at it. But from that optimal, it's for the workplace, for productivity. So and I find this to be really, like, why not start there? Or these are great guidelines, right? Like, if any of us wanted to start playing, I think these are great guidelines for us to start working from there, and maybe work our way out or something, and test like those edge cases or something. But that I don't know, just seeing the diagrams, how you present the information, it made a lot of sense to me.
I should also say that it's not like rules. I think of Captain Barbosa. They're more of guidelines, really. Like, it's
sure.
Yeah, I mean, design your thing however you want, as long as it's, not making people sick, and it's going to be easy to use and that sort of stuff. This is just sort of what I was thinking in my process of what might be good for an operating system. And it's kind of like how video, again, coming from video stuff, you have title safe and action safe zones for television, and it's sort of like that. Or in web stuff, you kind of know about these sort of banner blindness, or the areas that people are going to look to first, and so you kind of have zones in web design too. So it's sort of just some ideas for zones. It's not necessarily a end-all be-all or anything, and obviously it completely changes for room scale if you're designing a walking experience.
Yeah, those are two different things. I think the important thing is try to figure out zones, whether what you've defined is the optimal or not, but that there's an effort to try to do that and come up with something that works well amongst most people. But yeah, room scale, what do you do then? Like I guess there's going to be some people that are productive, right, at their desk sitting, so there's that case that you kind of went into in detail here, but then there's going to be people that like, I don't know, are going to explode an automobile engine and walk around it and learning and stand up and walk around things and tinker and learn in that sort of physical but not physical way. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think really ideally the balance is both, where you have basically an office, because I think about how I prefer to work in a real office is actually to be sitting and working on stuff sometimes, but have the space to get up and walk around and move, and maybe have different workstations where you have like I go over here and like draw on this whiteboard to think these concepts through, or I go over here and I like make something out of this stuff, and then I go sit at my desk and like work on this thing. And it does make sense that you would have that same sort of environment with either a Vive or an Oculus system with multiple cameras, that you would have your workspace that you would sit at, that you would have those zones being applied to that sort of content, but that you would then stand up and go to your walk around to your other things. And speaking of the ergonomics of it, it's not that great to sit for long periods of time. It's also not that great to stand for long periods of time, so it kind of helps to be the balance of that too anyways.
Cool. The next section gets into interaction. We get into things like buttons. You go through and do some mock-ups of what some actions and buttons would look like. And there's a use case, so I kind of want to step through those. So let's talk about interaction and stuff like that.
Sure. Is there anything you want to know more specifically, I guess?
No, I didn't write a bunch. I mean, it's just awesome stuff. I like consuming this and was kind of bringing it to everybody. Of course, everybody can just go watch the video, but when you were coming up with this research, you were discovering all this. So just more of your thoughts as we're talking about, how we're going to interact, like buttons in this specific case. You're basically pushing through buttons that aren't really there, so you're pushing through them, and that kind of concept I thought was, before I've tried the Control VR gloves out in first Oculus Connect, and I really didn't like that because I was pushing through things, and so we're seeing leap motion used in that way. I don't have a ton of experience with it, but I liked your concept of is there something natural in the world that represents like when you push through something, and your analog was water, and so just that whole process of your thoughts on that, and coming up with these different mock-ups for buttons.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So as is on the screen again, there's this thing where the finger is going through it, just to kind of see what that would look like. That's just an After Effects pre-visualization thing. And so I was thinking, is there anywhere that your finger goes through something that it wouldn't look weird? Because you end up with this weird synesthesia thing of like feeling the text, or like, I mean, feeling the interface elements, and if your hand's going through something, it kind of does, like, maybe your hairs prickle up or something on your hand or something like that, but it's sort of similar to maybe your finger is dipping into water or the surface of some sort of liquid, maybe Jello or whatever. But then I was thinking, well, I guess that it may as well be based, like if it's going to be an interface element, and we've kind of based previous interface elements on things that we would see in the natural world to some degree, but obviously abstracted with just trying to boil it down to single elements like color and shape, that maybe this could be based on that submersion idea of, like, I take a leaf and I put it under the water and now its state has changed. That's kind of a basic like thing that we understand. I put this into that changes a state of something, and so that seems to make sense with this sort of button concept. And obviously we love buttons as humans anyway. Like, you see a button, want to push it. So there's something about that, like changing a state by compressing that that object. And so it seems like, if you put those things together, you kind of end up with some of these designs. And I kind of these ones, I think it's the ones that are on the screen right now, I think it was the second one that I kind of liked the most, because the ring stroke there, you can see through it, you can see behind it, and it's not, for one, it's going to be better for quicker rendering because there's less of the opacity stuff that's being occluded, but also it seems like a simpler design, I guess. So that was the one that I put into the visualization thing that happens later.
I was thinking, like, so for me there, though, it feels like if I'm pushing on that, I'm not pushing something, though, in reality, so I don't have that feedback, that force feedback. But when you brought up the water kind of analog, I was thinking, like, if it was just like a touch, like, it just kind of ripples a little bit. It just like, oh, I obviously touched that because it's now rippling a little bit. Even and with water, you would barely feel that feedback anyway. So I was thinking that seemed pretty good, like floating buttons that ripple a little bit.
Yeah, and to speak to the lack of haptics, the Leap Motion people have also mentioned quite a bit about how audio adds quite a bit to Cinestage. Again, speaking to that, basically that adding a sound to when you contact it helps you to feel what isn't there, in the same way that you can, taste something that you smell without actually putting it in your mouth. You hear it and you feel like maybe you touched it, so you know where that sort of thing is. So yeah, there's not haptics, but obviously it's the sort of thing you have to work around. Oh, yeah, I forgot what I was
thinking about, like, on my phone, I like to have the little sounds on when I type. When I don't have that on, I don't feel like I'm as accurate. So yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's interesting. I turn them off on mine, but for sure that's why they have them there at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd rather it be quieter. Sometimes I'm in bed and I'm sure my wife could hear it or something. Maybe that's a good reason to turn them off. But yeah, I definitely like, the vibration and the sound as well. Let's see. Let's step through a little bit more. And it gets to this use case that I found to be kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's my favorite part, really.
Yeah, with Artec. What kind of company is that? What was the use case?
Oh, I kind of... Yeah, it was kind of just that one of the things that I've been doing lately is working on 3D scanning, and then there's also this kind of concept of, like, a 3D scanned museum, maybe. And so I was like, well, maybe this user is just a person who has a business that does 3D scanning for museums, and so that brand is really just one that I am kind of have been learning about recently, and so this is a video that I myself was watching and researching at some point. The user manual that gets pulled up is a user manual that I have been frequently going back to and referencing myself, and so I figured that I may as well use some existing content, not make my own, but try to make some existing content for something that would be practical for somebody to be doing. But I also figured that it's kind of a futuristic thing for somebody to be looking into, although it is currently existing, and so I figured it was kind of maybe a fun thing. But it really, the whatever video it is or whatever document it is sort of irrelevant to some degree.
She opens up the user manual and it defaults to...
So it looks like, you know, you have like your leap motion hand on the left, you have a wand on the right is an option here, you're fanning through documents.
Highlights the area by making a gesture.
Yep, and it's not necessarily that I think that people would be using a single Vive controller and a leap motion tracked hand. It's just that there's ideas for tracked hands and there's ideas for motion controllers, and I figured if I'm going to show something, I may as well show both at the same time, so that you can see what some of those things might be for either of them. For example, I do talk about the buttons idea and how those could be designed based on the submersion concept, but those are only useful for if you're using something like a leap motion, if you're using tracked hands. And what's really going to be coming out, because I was designing that stuff before Touch was announced, but so like what's really going to be happening is you've got Oculus Touch, which is 2 motion controllers, or you have the Vive controllers, which is 2 motion controllers, and that button design is completely irrelevant for all that stuff. So yeah, it's cool, and maybe it'll be useful if we end up with a hand-tracked situation in the future, or if people, the consumer market, or developers decide to start opting for something like the Leap Motion controller on its version 2 or something like that. But you know,
well, actually,
if
with the Touch, you actually would have the button option, because you can you use your pointing option there. You just hold down your one trigger and you don't press down the other trigger, and you basically point. And so when I was doing the toy box demo, there's some stacked blocks and whatnot, and you can just push the block off the top just with your index finger. It just feels very natural, like I push it off. So those buttons work actually really well there. One thing that I read that they did in their design was all the items that you're playing with there are very light objects. You don't want anything heavy, because that would feel odd when you're trying to grab them or push them. So something like a button, of course, is a very light thing. There's no force, not very much exertion that would need to be done there. So I think for that specific thing, Touch would work really well.
Okay. Yeah, I actually hadn't thought about that, because I was just thinking like the Vive controllers, for example. I haven't used Touch yet, but yeah, the Vive ones, using them, I don't think I would want to be hitting buttons with like a mallet, you know. It would be kind of a different thing.
Yeah. Touch for me is a bit more interesting than just having the wands. I mean, I got to try both when I was out there this last Oculus Connect 2, and Touch was more natural. It was more like grabbing and touching things, and I had more options with my fingers. It was pretty much your like claw fingers, your thumb, your index, and your middle finger, so you're kind of clawing at everything, which I think those are the most, you know, the fingers you would use the most. So I think that sort of makes a lot of sense. And there's like a resting motion where you can just kind of have your hands open and it's just resting on there, so there's kind of open hands and whatnot. So yeah, I definitely would love to get, you know, feedback once you've tried that to see what you think of Touch, and hope you get to try some of that soon.
Oh, me too, of course.
So in here you have where you look at, so you're exploring different options, you know, from the wand to the leap motion to you look at your arm on the left and it has, you know, more than just a watch, but a whole kind of various different HUD elements just right on your arm that are mapped there, which is very interesting. And then you turn soon over to look at the assistant that you would talk to. And so I think that's really cool. Like on a phone, you'd hold down maybe the home button, and then you get your Siri or your Google Now, and it would be prompted. Then that would be the action, that the input that it's going to use as you're talking based on holding on that button. But when in this situation, all you got to do is look to the left, and now the focus is on what you're saying, not where you're necessarily moving your hands or any of that other stuff isn't what's in focus.
Yeah, I actually do have some interesting things to say. I could say about those things. So when the user looks at the arm, the idea there was I don't know if you can pause it like right there. Yeah. So the idea was that you have status indicators on your phone or on your computer that are always visible. They're always available at a glance, and it's typically things like your Wi-Fi, your battery, your Bluetooth, the time, the date. But I also thought that you should probably have, in VR, you would want your frame rate, your RAM, your CPU, and so the idea, like, it's not very clear and it's only there for just a second, but the idea is that your RAM is being represented as chunks that are the applications and the percentage of the RAM that each of them are using, and then the size of those chunks is like how thick they are is how much CPU. It seems that a large part of our psychology that has to do with the social interactions with other people has to do with their physical appearance, and we kind of remember people based on how they look, in the sense that if you were to go to a party one week and you met this person and you had this conversation, you talked about these things, you met this other person, you had this conversation, talked about these things, and everybody there is wearing name tags, so you remember these names and faces. Then the next week you go back to the same party, and the person that you talked to before is now wearing a different skin, and you have a harder time remembering what it was you talked about and associating the personality with that individual. And then to compound that, somebody else might be wearing the skin that they were wearing that previous week, and so your associated memory is going to project onto that other person the memories that you had and the relationship that you built with that person the previous week, even though it's a completely different person. And I don't think that I don't know if anybody's done any studies on this sort of thing yet, but I really think that has a lot of weight and merit, and it should be considered in these sorts of social interactions that happen. And I noticed that in myself, if I switch avatars, people have a harder time remembering me. You get over it over time and you kind of remember people by their name, but you'll find that the people who have the most successful social interactions seem to be the ones that stick to some sort of avatar or a persona. For example, Mr. Whiskers is always a cat, and you know exactly who he is. He always looks the same. Yeah, except sometimes his face glitters. Oh, adorable. But so the thought process for me was, okay, what in the world would nobody else want to be that I would want to be? Because you know, I'm a fan of like Half-Life, for example. I could be Gordon Freeman, but other people would also want to do that. There's a lot of other things that other people would also want to be, and the natural conclusion is me. There's no reason that anybody else would want to like pose as me, I don't think. But I'm totally fine with being me, and it also makes sense then to, on top of that, suggest that the social interactions that I have in virtual reality, I would want for people to be able to translate those into real life, in the sense that if I run into you at some sort of event, I want you to be able to recognize me, not only on a just like name recognition level, but on the recognition level that's deep-seated in your brain, again, as an evolved human that has these social tendencies built into your psyche, that you would recognize the relationship or the times that we've talked previously because of the facial recognition and the body, language and that sort of stuff that is a natural part of the way that humans interface with one another. And so this was kind of the thought process, is that I want the persona of myself to translate in VR and in real life, again based on that really base human nature stuff, and I want people to be able to remember who I am based on having social interactions in that way. And I don't want to like diss alt space, but that's like part of the reason that I feel like I have a hard time in there establishing connections and relationships, is that I can't visually tell people apart, and so I can't really remember the interactions that I had with them previously, because they're all visually really similar.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the social platforms, VR platforms right now, they are the least app or avatar customizable. I mean, all the others basically have the option to customize in some way. I didn't even think about that. I knew I was always interested in more of custom avatars, but I didn't even make that association that, I'm not able to distinguish who people are.
Yeah, it's not to say that the stylization is not important. I think it's really great and important to have a cohesive style for an application, and there's a danger in the sandbox nature of being able to do anything, where you get kind of a MySpace end result of like a lot of people making kind of crappy content, and then the whole thing becomes kind of crappy, leading to you saw that happen to MySpace.
Yeah.
I don't want to, again, not meaning to like diss these other things like high fidelity or anything, but I think that that's kind of what happened to Second Life as well, is that you had when everybody creates whatever content, there's no cohesive style, and there's no quality assurance or anything like that, and you kind of get sort of a muddled like feeling to all of it. But that there's good and bad things about those sorts of things anyway. So I can see why they would want to do stylization and why they would want to have that sort of thing. It's just that for me, when it's social interaction with another human and trying to remember the relationships and continue having a continuity of relationship, being able to recognize and associate a personality and relationship with a physical figure, especially a human, it seems to be really important.
Yeah, so I struggle with some of this because I'm establishing a personality in social VR and just in the VR community in general. And I've gone through, this is a third avatar that I'm playing with, and I'm not sure what final form I want, or the everything is changing, evolving, the way that the quality of the avatars are, all of our skills are getting better, so we're able to do different things. And then I've thought about, I am jealous of those that have a scan of their own, face or body and whatnot. I find that to be pretty rad, and I'd like to play with both options. And there was a disconnect when I went to Connect. A lot of people, were surprised at, how I looked. I don't look adorable. I look like a bearded Sasquatch, so that can throw people completely off from a black armored Tron guy, or before I was a Hunter S. Thompson character in my first incarnation of avatars. And actually last year at Connect or SSVR, I showed up with like the Hunter S. Thompson shirt and hat and stuff, just to kind of play into that persona, since I thought people might recognize me that way. So yeah, very interesting. I'm glad this is really cool observations and things that is helping me to think further out, my own ideas with this as well. So Yeah, I'm not sure what's going to be in my future, and I guess there's still plenty of time to change things. I guess that's where I'm not sure where I'm going to land, but yeah, I want to look. I like the idea of future. I like the idea of being in VR and it being something different. But as well, I wish I had a mouth. I need a mouth on this guy to talk more than since I'm doing a lot of talking up here, and so a lot of ideas, yeah, being thrown around there. What about just the idea though of like uh, places that feel more real and replicate real life versus places that are fantastic beyond what we could do in normal life, maybe take advantage of the power of VR. I assume there's things for both of these, but just what are your thoughts on do you find that you like one or the other, or just like having both options?
Um, well, real quick, before I answer that, I'll say if you want a scan of yourself, do the photogrammetry thing, because it's easy, easy enough anyway. I mean, if you can, it's easy enough to get the mesh and stuff out of that, and then if you can, if you have any 3D modeling or texturing or that sort of experience or that sort of stuff, then you'll be able to, you could stick that on that body or do whatever you want with it to get your whole body or whatever. So, yeah, that would be my recommendation on that. But then, so the environment thing, I don't necessarily have a preference between the, well, no, I guess I do prefer the more realistic ones. The things that are more reminiscent to actual environments are probably the most impressive, but I do understand again that there's a stylization and an artistry that happens within things. Everybody loves Tom 23 Digital Life, for example, and that's not necessarily a real life sort of thing, but it's extremely artistically compelling. So I think that the thing to say to that sort of stuff is to echo what other developers and people in the VR, kind of people who are recommending things to do for VR design and that sort of stuff, is that any environment should have things, properties, you might say, of the real world in order to be most accepted by the brain, which would be things like shadows, ambient occlusion, global illumination. If you can bake these things into these maps, even if it is a stylized sort of thing, having realistic ways for light to be bouncing off of things and having suggestions of textures and using normal maps effectively to round edges and add imperfections and simulate the way that light bounces off of real-world objects absolutely goes miles for any environment or avatar or anything that you create in virtual reality, because the brain is used to accepting these sorts of things from when you were a baby and seeing and observing the properties of physical reality around you. You accept things to a certain degree in virtual reality if it doesn't have that stuff, just because you have those cues of parallax and stereoscopy and the head tracking that's going on and that sort of thing. And so it's giving you that illusion to trick your optical system, but to really get into really the presence of the perceptual system, it's those things that really help to get the deep-seated stuff in your brain believing that you're in that environment, and that's when I feel like you get the really nice VR experiences, I suppose. But there's still really having stylized and low poly and that sort of stuff is still fine, and you can add those sort of lighting elements and all those things to low poly environments as well.
Great, awesome. So let's open things up to the audience. It's been a really great discussion. Learning
Cool.
a lot. Yeah. And yeah, who's got a question? Just go ahead and say your name and ask your question.
All right, I got a question. Adam J back here.
Cool.
Hey, Adam.
Yeah. I'll look through the chair at you.
I was just recently using 123D Catch, teaching some friends and family how to use it for 3D printing applications, and you said you some of your peers at school were 3D printing majors or interested in that. I was wondering if you ever talked to them about crossover applications between VR and 3D printing, or if anything on the future interests you in that.
Absolutely. So, so this guy Nikos right here, who has the avatar of the army guy, is actually looking under my I just looked under my helmet and he's fallen asleep on the couch. But oh nope, he's awake. Okay. But he just barely finished his master's in is it rapid prototyping? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, rapid prototyping, doing 3D printing, and he was working on 3D printing prosthetic legs for children to be more affordable. And, of course, there's, like, you know, going to be a lot of cross-contamination between the rapid prototyping worlds of things like 3D printing. And yeah, there's another guy that's just starting up that same course, and he wants to do a sort of thing where you can create your avatar using something like photogrammetry, like 123D Catch, and submit that to him, and then he would apply that to some sort of avatar that already has like pre-built body or something like that, and then you can put the face on it and use that in, I mean, it's a 3D model, so then if you have a 3D model, you can easily, rigging isn't easy necessarily, but it's definitely possible. So you can put that into a game, but you can also print that. So the scans that you I mean, there's these scans on the screens and stuff, but I have some other scans, and that's definitely something that I did over this last year, was learned how to 3D print, and I 3D printed myself so much that people thought that I was being pretty narcissistic, but now that I'm traveling back to the States, I'm going to be like giving them to people for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, it's really it seems like people who are interested in VR are also interested in 3D printing. I bet my head looks really weird spinning around on my body like this, but
oh, for sure.
yeah. But that is yeah. It's pretty quick to take any avatar and 3D print it, and it seems like the sort of thing is that a lot of people will probably be doing to some degree anyway.
Cool. I guess it does make sense to like have the person come down here to the table and maybe ask questions so we can look at them. It is kind of awkward when the person's behind you. So, other questions?
Cube here.
Hey, Cube.
Now that the HoloLens is out this morning, will you be getting a dev kit?
Whoa, I have not heard this news.
Yeah, Microsoft announced the Surface Pro 4, laptop that turns into a tablet, and HoloLens pre-orders.
Oh man, I've been packing all day, and then went to the pub with some friends for the last time, but I totally did not know that there was HoloLens dev kits.
Yep.
Yeah,
for reference, they're $3,000.
$3,000.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I'll take 2.
Okay. Well,
put them together and get a bigger field of view, right?
I guess the answer to that would be I will not be buying one for myself, but I would love to work at a place that does have one. Yeah, I think the answer that it's a really great technology. And you know, I did do kind of a little shots fired thing in the video because it's not directed at the HoloLens, which is very obviously you know, cutting edge technology. It's the headset that we're all wearing, but using projected light reflecting instead, and it's kind of the next step from Google Glass, but combined with head-mounted display technology from like Oculus Rift sort of things. And so it's really fantastic tech that they're working on, and they've got really great ideas that they're doing with it. It's just that in my opinion, the corporate policies of locking all that knowledge behind NDAs and making it inaccessible so that it can't progress because they want to profit off of it more than they want to help humanity with it. And then on top of that, that the marketing for it is being misrepresentative of what it actually is capable of. For example, you can't, if you're going to design an interface for that, you can't have floating black text around the user because black will not show up because it's projected light and you can't project the color black. So yeah, it just I wish that the videos which are showing it as a technology were more honestly representative, and you could tell that they caught a wind of that, and that that they understood that there was going to be some sort of backlash if they didn't represent it more accurately. And then they had that what was it, the partnership with the education thing where they're showing medical application, and the guy's like carrying a beating heart across the room, and they'll show a first-person view on that sometimes. The problem is that it's zoomed in to almost the field of view of the area of the screen, which is just, you know, that's a focal length trick where they're, you know, using like a 50mm lens, where your eye would actually be seeing a lot more peripherally. So it's close, but it's, you know, you're still not really being honest about it. And so, you know, it's so strange that you have in virtual reality this feeling of open source collaboration. We're all like making avatars with each other, and we're sharing environments with each other in this thing, and people have all these demos on Oculus Share, and you can download all sorts of stuff, and everybody's trying things and sharing their results and writing papers and making videos and blog posts about all of their findings, and the technology is exploding and progressing, and like humanity will benefit as a result of that. And on the it's like such a similar technology, but augmented reality in the form of both HoloLens and Magic Leap is like behind the Iron Curtain for some reason. All of us like want to get in, we want to help, we want to like look at it and like see what we can do with it, and we could make the coolest stuff for it, and it would sell their products like crazy. But for some reason they don't want us to know the specs, they don't want us to try it. And I mean, I guess apparently now there are dev kits for 10 times the amount of a DK2, but it's just so strange that they are taking such an opposite approach to it. And it seems to me that that means that the technology for consumer adoption is going to be a lot further out in the end as a result. Mm-hmm. But you know, that's an opinion maybe, but yeah, so would I buy one myself? That doesn't sound like it immediately, but would I work on it at a place? Absolutely. That sounds like, I mean, you know, it's a really interesting technology.
Yeah, I don't even think I would buy it for $300. I don't see any. Doesn't seem to be good enough for me right now. So, yeah, maybe it's going to be for the business sector, but. Yeah. All right, so I think that's basically it. Mike, why don't you plug yourself, tell us what's going on in your life, where you can send people.
Well, maybe I jumped the gun on putting that video out there because I was like, okay, I'll put this out and then I'll make get my resume ready and try to apply to a couple places and stuff, but it's already out there and now people probably have already looked at this stuff and it's like, oh, my site's not actually that great, so I'm not going to plug my site or my resume or anything like that because I don't really have, I don't have that much going on as far as that stuff. But I will say that on Friday is a data it's Thursday through Friday, I think. It's a data visualization conference in New York called Visualize, and I'm going to be speaking at that about, basically presenting the same concept and talking about these same sorts of things, but going a little more into what the ethical implications are and what we can expect from that sort of thing in the end. And if you want to check it out, it's visualize.com. I imagine that in the past they record all the presentations to put them online eventually too, so maybe you'll want to check that out in the future. But yeah, that's the only thing that I can think of that I would really want to plug right now.
What about maybe your Twitter or your email if people want to reach out and ask you questions or offer you a $1 million job?
Yeah, sure. Email is mike@mikealger.com. That's MikeAlger. And then Twitter is, I think, @thealphamike.
Yeah.
TheAlphamike. Yeah. I've kind of I used to just tweet whatever I felt like before I decided to get serious about VR stuff, and then I started, now I'm going to represent myself as this VR person. So if you go back in the past on that, I'm sure, it's the same for my site or anything that you look up on me. Like, you go back by like 2 years, and it's all just ridiculous stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah, my YouTube is it's almost embarrassing, but whatever, that's me. That's fine.
I didn't have enough time to dig around in there. I found some things about I don't know, your younger years or something. I was kept cleaning. I was like, that's probably
right.
Really good to bring up, but I didn't have enough time. So.
If anything says happy birthday on it, just know that I have a friend that really likes Tim and Eric. I have a friend that likes Tim and Eric, cool. And so I did it in that style, and people come across that randomly throughout my life, and they're like, what in the world is this? So there's a lot of weird stuff, but that's fine.
The weird stuff's cool. It's cool.
Don't worry about it, Mike. It's okay. If anybody really wanted to look, they could find all sorts of fun videos about me. You still feel like you're legitimate in the industry.
Yeah. I'm not embarrassed of who I am. It's just that, I'm not going to put it on my resume or anything.
Sure.
Oh, by the way, your website is awesome, by the way, Mike.
Which?
The one that has your resume and stuff, the way you put out your
/ professional, yeah.
It is it's funnier than hell. I love it. And I even love the disclaimer at the very bottom with the ISBN number for everyone poops. That was
you looked at I thought that nobody would ever yeah. Yep.
Yeah. No, I look for stuff like that all the time.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that resume site's fantastic. That's something to be.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about that I'd want to fix up a little because I need to add. There's a bunch of stuff I've done since I put that site up, and so I've done projection mapping projects and all these hackathons and random stuff, and so I need to add all that stuff to the demonstration, whatever. But anyway.
Yeah, you will.
Oh, I had a real
cool
quick.
Dude. Yeah, what's up, Busy?
Well, that was scary.
Hey, I was watching your video and I was like 5 minutes into it, I was like, oh, dude, I know that dude from VR chat. So that completely validates your whole, your avatar and stuff.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's still not that. This version that I've been using for half a year now probably is still not. It's too shiny. It doesn't really look that much. I mean, it's close, but yeah, I'm glad that that seems legitimate in some way, I guess. That theory, hypothesis.
Cool. So yeah, just a few announcements on my end. Friday's karaoke night. Look for the Reddit post on Friday for the time and all that. Doesn't happen exactly the same time every week, so just be on the lookout for that. Streaming demos on every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. It's been a lot of fun. And then after that, we jump into the VR chat meetup, which is at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. And there's a VR chat community Skype group. So if you want to get on that and hang out there and chat with everybody, you can. Best way is just get in contact with me, and I'll put you in the group. So just go to guntersuniverse.com. There's all kinds of ways to contact me there. There's a newsletter to sign up, so you can get alerted via your email when things are happening. There's also a Patreon link there, and that's how you can support the work that I'm doing here. Give $1 a week would be greatly appreciative. Basically buying me a cup of coffee every week, and it goes a long way. And thank you to those that are already Patreons and supporting me. Really appreciate that. Future guests, I will have Boone from Oculus on, Tipatat, who's a VR investor, and much more. So guys from VRidio, Philip Rosedale of High Fidelity will be coming on at some point. Just got to nail down the dates with these guys, but and also Matt Damon from Good Will Hunting will be joining us at some point as well. Just kidding.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, no, not Matt Damon. I'm just gonna say that every show, like I think Kimmel does, right?
Yeah.
All right, so that's it. Thanks, Kenny, Dark Akuma, VR chat community, and everybody watching. Have a great rest of your week, and see you next Tuesday back here in Gunters Universe.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Woohoo! Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Mike. Awesome.
Yeah, your video was awesome, man. I love it. Really
How come the cat can jump, damn it?
Cat is talented.